Hamburger. Americans eat 50 billion hamburgers every year. That's roughly 3 burgers per person per week. And yet, nobody knows who actually made the first one. At least 5 places are fighting over that claim right now. All of them have evidence. None of them can prove it. In 1885, a 15-year-old kid named Charlie Negreen was selling meatballs at a county fair in Seymour, Wisconsin. Business was slow. Nobody wanted to stop walking, stand still, and eat a meatball. So Charlie flattened one out, put it between 2 slices of bread, and handed it to someone who didn't have to stop moving to eat it. He called it a hamburger, borrowing the name from Hamburg steak, the German-style minced beef that immigrants had already made familiar. Same year, different state. Brothers Frank and Charles Menches were selling sausage sandwiches at the Erie County Fair in Hamburg, New York. They ran out of sausage midday. They ran to a butcher, bought ground beef, threw in some coffee and brown sugar to give it flavor, and put it on bread. When they looked up, they saw a banner with the name of the town they were standing in. Hamburg. They named the sandwich after it. 1900, New Haven, Connecticut. A Danish immigrant named Louis Lassen served a ground beef sandwich to a customer who was in a hurry. That's the version the Library of Congress officially recognizes. Still disputed. 1900, Tulsa, Oklahoma. A man named Oscar Weber Bilby allegedly served the first hamburger on a proper bun on the 4th of July. In 1995, the governor of Oklahoma declared Tulsa the real birthplace of the hamburger. Texas disagreed. Wisconsin disagreed. Nobody agreed. Here's what most people get wrong. The name hamburger doesn't mean the burger came from Hamburg, Germany. It came from the name Hamburg steak, a style of minced beef that German immigrants brought with them. The actual sandwich, patty between bread, eaten by hand, sold at fairs, that was entirely American. And the bun wasn't even part of the original deal. It didn't exist until 1916, when a fry cook named Walter Anderson designed a round bun to match the patty. He later co-founded White Castle. The cheeseburger came even later, and even more accidentally. In 1924, a 16-year-old named Lionel Stenberger was working at his father's sandwich shop in Pasadena, California. He either accidentally dropped a slice of cheese onto a frying patty, or he was trying to save a burger that was about to burn. The customer got it anyway. The customer liked it. The cheeseburger was born from a teenager's mistake. 50 billion a year, 3 burgers a week. And the origin story is still a fight between 5 states over a sandwich. Hot dog. The hot dog is the most American food at every American event. The ballpark, the 4th of July cookout, the gas station at midnight. It is also not American. The sausage itself, the Frankfurter, came from Germany in the 1600s. German immigrants brought it to America through the 1800s and started selling it on street corners. In 1870, a German immigrant named Charles Feltman opened the first hot dog stand on Coney Island, New York. He sold 3,600 of them in his first year. No bun yet. Customers held it with a napkin or just grabbed it bare. The name hot dog has no confirmed origin. One story says a sports cartoonist named T.A.D. Dorgan drew a cartoon of a dachshund sausage in a bun at a 1901 baseball game and wrote hot dog underneath because he couldn't spell dachshund. That story turned out to be almost entirely fabricated. The cartoon was never found, and Dorgan wasn't even in New York that day. The name just appeared in newspapers around that time, spread on its own, and never needed a real explanation. But the most surprising hot dog story involves a king. In 1939, President Franklin D. Roosevelt invited King George VI and Queen Elizabeth of England to visit the White House. State dinners at that level usually meant lobster, prime rib, fine wine from France. Roosevelt served hot dogs. It was the first time a British monarch had ever eaten a hot dog. British newspapers couldn't decide whether to be confused or offended. The Queen asked for seconds. Roosevelt reportedly said he wanted the King and Queen to experience something genuinely American, A hot dog at a picnic table at Hyde Park, New York. That was his answer. That moment got photographed. It got printed in papers on both sides of the Atlantic. And somehow, a German sausage sold by German immigrants became the defining symbol of American identity at a presidential dinner. Americans eat around 20 billion hot dogs every year. 7 billion of those get eaten between May and September, summer, festival season, baseball season. On the 4th of July alone, Americans eat approximately 150 million hot dogs in a single day. A food that came from Germany, got named by accident, and was served to a British king. That's the hot dog. Southern BBQ. QBQ might be the most emotionally loaded food in America. Most people eating it don't know the story behind it. In the 17th and 18th centuries, enslaved people brought from West Africa worked on plantations across the American South. Plantation owners kept the best cuts for their own tables: the loins, the shoulders, the ribs. The leftover parts, ears, snouts, feet, intestines, the pieces that any butcher today would throw away, those were given to the enslaved. They had no choice about what they cooked, but they knew how to make it good. They built open pits outside, used slow-burning wood, and smoked the meat for hours, sometimes an entire day, until the toughest cuts became tender enough to pull apart with 2 fingers. If you can't chew through it, you cook it until you can. That technique, low heat, long time, wood smoke, that is American barbecue. Not a weekend hobby, a survival skill. After emancipation in 1865, Black Americans carried that knowledge with them as they moved north and west during the Great Migration of the 20th century. Barbecue moved with them. Restaurants opened, neighborhoods learned. Eventually, the whole country followed. Today, there are 4 major schools of barbecue in America, and each one considers itself the original, and each one is correct for its own reasons. Texas is beef, brisket specifically, seasoned with nothing but salt and black pepper, smoked for 12 to 14 hours over post oak wood. No sauce. The smoke does the talking. Central Texas barbecue was shaped by German and Czech immigrants who brought their meat-smoking traditions from Europe. They were applying it to sausage, but Texans applied it to beef, and something completely different came out. Carolina is pork. Whole hog, cooked low and slow, pulled apart and dressed in a thin, tangy vinegar sauce. No sweetness. Light. Clean. Kansas City is the version most of the world pictures when they think American barbecue. Thick, sweet, tomato-based sauce, dark and glossy, covering everything. Beef and pork. Ribs especially. Memphis is dry. No sauce on the ribs. Instead, they're rubbed before cooking with a mix of paprika and spices. And the crust that forms on the outside during smoking, the bark, that's where everything happens. 4 cities, 4 completely different philosophies, 0 compromise. And at every competition, every state fair, every neighborhood cookout, somebody is making the case that their version is the only real one. In many towns across the South, the pitmaster, the person who tends the fire through the night, is treated with the same respect as a craftsman or an elder. There are barbecue joints in Texas and the Carolinas that have kept their fires burning without ever fully extinguishing them for more than 100 years. It started as something people had no choice but to make. It became the thing that America is most proud to call its own: fried chicken. Nobody owns fried chicken, but almost everyone has tried to take credit for it. The actual origin is 2 traditions that arrived at the same place at the same time and collided in the kitchens of southern plantations. Scottish immigrants brought the habit of frying chicken in hot fat to the American South in the 1700s. That was their technique. No particular seasoning, just fat and heat. At the same time, enslaved people from West Africa came with something the Scottish settlers didn't have: a knowledge of deep, layered spicing. The kind of seasoning that changes the flavor from the outside in. The kind that European colonists of that era didn't know how to do. Both traditions ended up in the same kitchen. One group had the technique, The other had the flavor, and neither one was in that kitchen by choice. The result was Southern fried chicken, what people around the world recognize today. The history books often credited the plantation owners for the food that came out of those kitchens. They weren't the ones standing at the stove. After emancipation, black women in the South began selling fried chicken at railroad depots, particularly in Virginia and Georgia. Passengers on long-distance trains would stop, buy fried chicken wrapped in newspaper, and eat it on board. This happened decades before McDonald's opened, before the drive-thru existed, before fast food was even a concept. That was the first fast food in America. It just never got a golden arch. Then there's the Nashville story. In the 1930s, a man named Thornton Prince was known around Nashville as someone who stayed out late and came home later. One night he came home past midnight. His partner, tired of it, cooked him fried chicken loaded with cayenne pepper. Enough heat to be a punishment. She expected him to suffer. He ate it. He liked it. He liked it enough to open a restaurant around the idea. Prince's Hot Chicken has been serving in Nashville ever since. In 2017, a man named Dave Nettles opened Dave's Hot Chicken out of a parking lot in Los Angeles with a small crew and a card table. By 2024, Dave's had more than 900 locations across the country. One revenge meal in 1930. A billion-dollar industry in 2024. And the Japan detail. Since 1974, it has become a tradition in Japan to eat KFC on Christmas Eve. Not because of any deep cultural connection, because a marketing campaign worked. Today, Japanese families pre-order their Christmas KFC 2 months in advance. There are waiting lists. A fried chicken chain from Kentucky became part of Japanese Christmas. And nobody can fully explain how, but nobody's stopping it either. Clam chowder. New England clam chowder looks simple. Cream, clams, potatoes, salt pork. A bowl of something warm and heavy on a cold day near the coast. The history behind it is older than the United States itself. The Wampanoag people, who lived along the coastline of what is now Massachusetts, had been eating quahog clams for hundreds of years before any European arrived. They cooked them with corn and beans in open pots. When French and English settlers arrived, they brought potatoes and salted pork. Those went into the pot too. The word chowder comes from the French word chaudière, meaning cauldron, the large pot used for cooking communal stews, a French word attached to an English dish, built on a Native American ingredient base. That's how most of American food actually works. The first written mention of clam chowder in American media appeared in a Boston newspaper in 1751, but it wasn't sold in a restaurant until 1836, at the Ye Olde Union Oyster House in Boston. That restaurant is still open today. It holds the title of America's oldest continuously operating restaurant, and clam chowder is still on the menu. President John F. Kennedy ate clam chowder almost every day he was in the White House. He was from Massachusetts. It was a point of regional identity, as much as personal preference. Staff who served him recalled that regardless of what the official menu was, there was always a bowl of chowder somewhere on his table. Here is where it gets territorial. There are 3 major styles of clam chowder in America, and the people of New England treat the differences as a serious matter. New England style is white, cream-based, thick, heavy, loaded with potatoes and chunks of clam. This is the version most people know, and the version New Englanders consider the only legitimate one. Manhattan style is red, tomato-based, lighter, with a brothy consistency. It first appeared in a recipe in 1934. New Englanders have been arguing against it ever since. Rhode Island style is clear. No cream, no tomato, just clean clam broth with clams and potatoes. Pure, minimal. In 1939, the state legislature of Maine introduced an actual bill that would have made it illegal to put tomatoes in clam chowder. The bill did not pass. The opinion has not changed. Mac and cheese. Everyone credits Thomas Jefferson. The real story is more complicated, and the person who actually did the work is someone most people have never heard of. Jefferson lived in Paris from 1784 to 1789 as America's minister to France. While there, he encountered pasta dishes that Americans had no experience with. He was fascinated enough to sketch a pasta-making machine, write detailed notes on the process, and arrange for equipment to be shipped back to Virginia. He brought macaroni and cheese to America. That part is true, but Jefferson didn't cook it. James Hemings did. Hemings was enslaved by Jefferson and traveled with him to Paris. While there, Hemings formally studied French cuisine, learning techniques at professional kitchens. He was one of the first Americans, free or enslaved, to receive that level of culinary training in Europe. When Jefferson returned to America, Hemings returned with him, and Hemings was the one who stood at the stove. In 1802, a baked macaroni and cheese dish appeared at a presidential dinner in the White House. That is one of the earliest documented appearances of the dish in an official American context. Jefferson's name is in the history books. Hemings's name was largely forgotten for nearly 2 centuries. The dish stayed relatively uncommon until 1937, when Kraft introduced a boxed version, 19 cents a box, powdered cheese, dried pasta, ready in under 10 minutes. During World War II, 2 boxes of Kraft mac and cheese could be purchased for a single ration point. Families bought it by the case. In its first year, Kraft sold 8 million boxes. In 2022, Kraft still sold more than 1 million boxes of mac and cheese every single day in the United States. There is also a version of this story that has nothing to do with Jefferson or Kraft. In Black communities across the American South, mac and cheese was never an everyday food. It was a celebration dish, made from scratch, baked in a deep pan, heavy with real cheese, placed in the center of the table at holidays and family gatherings. That tradition existed before Jefferson ever tasted macaroni in Paris. It continues today, unchanged, in households where the recipe is passed down by hand and never written in a box. Deep dish pizza. Pizza is Italian. That part isn't a debate. What happened to pizza after it arrived in America? That's where it gets interesting. Italian immigrants brought pizza to New York in the late 1800s. The version they brought was thin, light, simple, close to what you'd find in Naples. New York took it, stretched the slices wider, folded them in half, and made them into something you could eat while walking fast on a crowded sidewalk. That's the New York version. Fast, portable, iconic. Chicago went in the opposite direction. In 1943, Ike Sewell, a former University of Texas football player turned restaurateur, opened Pizzeria Uno on the corner of Ohio and Wabash in Chicago. He didn't want a thin crust. He wanted something substantial, something that felt like a full meal, not a snack. So he built the pizza upside down. Cheese goes on the bottom, directly on the dough. Toppings go on the cheese. Crushed tomatoes go on top of everything, so they don't burn in the long bake. The crust is built up along the sides of an oiled steel pan, tall enough to hold everything inside. It bakes at a lower temperature for longer than any thin crust pizza. When it comes out of the oven, it doesn't look like pizza. It looks like a pie. Italian Americans in Chicago looked at it and didn't recognize it. Some still don't. The debate that followed has never stopped. New York says deep dish is a casserole wearing a pizza costume. Chicago says New York pizza is an underbaked flatbread with delusions of grandeur. Both cities have been saying this since the 1940s. No resolution is coming. No resolution is wanted. The pizza industry in the United States is worth approximately $46 billion a year. Americans eat around 3 billion pizzas annually, roughly 8 million a day. Somewhere in all of that, New York and Chicago are still arguing about whose version counts. Buffalo wings. On October 30th, 1964, a delivery arrived at the Anchor Bar in Buffalo, New York. It was the wrong order. Teresa Bellissimo had ordered chicken necks, cheap, mostly bone, used for making stock. What showed up instead was a box of chicken wings. Wings in 1964 were not a menu item. They were not considered food in the way that a chicken breast or a thigh was food. They were too small, too awkward, mostly fat and skin. Restaurants used them for broth or threw them out. Teresa fried them anyway. She tossed them in melted butter and Frank's red-hot sauce. She put them on a plate with celery sticks and blue cheese dressing on the side. The celery and blue cheese were there because she had them in the kitchen, not because anyone planned the combination. Her son came in late that night, hungry, and she put the wings in front of him. He liked them. His friends liked them. The bar started serving them. Word spread. That's the official story. There is another version. John Young was a black man running a restaurant called Wings and Things in Buffalo around the same time. He was serving sauce-covered chicken wings before Bellissimo's night happened. His sauce was sometimes called Mambo sauce. Some food historians argue that the real origin belongs to Young, not to the Anchor Bar. Young's story has never been featured in the official anniversary celebrations. His name doesn't appear in most retellings. What happened to the chicken wing as a food category after 1964 is a particular kind of American story. A part of the chicken that was considered worthless, too small, too fatty, not worth the effort, became the most consumed item during the largest television event of the year. On Super Bowl Sunday 2024, Americans ate approximately 1.4 billion chicken wings. That works out to about 4 wings for every single person in the country, consumed in a single afternoon. The price of chicken wings has risen by more than 200% over the last 20 years. The part of the chicken that used to be thrown away is now one of the most expensive cuts per pound on the market. Teresa Bellissimo didn't plan to start a food movement. She just didn't want to waste a wrong delivery. Nashville hot chicken. In the 1930s, a man named Thornton Prince was known in Nashville for 2 things: his fried chicken and his habit of staying out past midnight. One night he came home very late. His partner had been waiting. She decided not to argue about it. Instead, she cooked him fried chicken and added something extra to the seasoning. Cayenne pepper. A lot of it. Enough to be a punishment. The plan was that he'd take one bite, feel the heat, and understand the message. He took a bite. He liked it. He liked it enough that he did not treat it as a punishment at all. He treated it as a discovery. Thornton Prince went on to open a restaurant, Prince's Hot Chicken Shack, built entirely around that spicy preparation. The technique involves coating the fried chicken in a paste made from cayenne and other spices after it comes out of the oil, while the skin is still crackling and the grease is still hot. The heat hits immediately. There's no delay. Prince's is still operating in Nashville today. For decades, hot chicken was a local secret, something Nashville people knew about and visitors didn't. It lived in specific neighborhoods, passed down through specific families, without much attention from outside. That changed in the 2010s, when food media started writing about it and national chains started reverse engineering it. McDonald's launched a version. KFC launched a version. In 2017, Dave's Hot Chicken opened out of a parking lot in East Hollywood with a folding table and a small crew. 7 years later, Dave's had more than 900 locations across the country and a valuation in the hundreds of millions of dollars. A revenge dinner in a Nashville kitchen in the 1930s. A parking lot pop-up in Los Angeles in 2017. 900 locations in 2024. That is the full arc of Nashville hot chicken. Chocolate chip cookie. In 1938, Ruth Graves Wakefield was running the Toll House Inn in Whitman, Massachusetts, with her husband, Kenneth. Wakefield was not a casual baker. She had a degree in household arts. She had built the Toll House's reputation on the quality of its desserts. People drove from other parts of New England specifically to eat what came out of her kitchen. The version of the story that gets repeated most often goes like this. One day, while making cookies, she ran out of baker's chocolate. She grabbed a Nestlé semi-sweet chocolate bar, broke it into pieces, and threw the pieces into the dough. She expected the chocolate to melt completely and spread through the cookie the way baker's chocolate would. It didn't melt. The pieces held their shape. The cookie came out of the oven with pockets of soft, warm chocolate throughout. Accident. Invention. Most popular cookie in the United States. Food historians have pushed back on the accident version for years. A woman with Wakefield's training and experience doesn't run out of ingredients and improvise without understanding what she's doing. The more likely explanation is that she was deliberately experimenting, trying something new, seeing if it worked. The accident story is more charming, so that's the one that survived. What happened next is one of the stranger transactions in American food history. The recipe took off immediately. It was published in a regional newspaper. It was read on Betty Crocker's radio program. It spread across New England and then across the country. Nestlé noticed that sales of their semi-sweet chocolate bars were spiking dramatically in areas where the recipe was circulating, because people were buying the bars specifically to break apart and use in the cookies. In 1939, Nestlé approached Wakefield with an offer. She gave them the rights to reproduce her recipe on their packaging and the right to use the Toll House name. In exchange, she received $1 and a lifetime supply of Nestlé chocolate. $1. Chocolate for life. Nestlé began printing the Toll House cookie recipe on the back of every package of chocolate chips they sold. They also started selling pre-scored chocolate bars that broke apart more easily for baking. Then they started selling the chips themselves, already broken apart, in bags. The recipe on the bag is still, structurally, Ruth Wakefield's recipe. During World War II, the cookies' reach extended further than any marketing campaign could have managed. Mothers and wives mailed chocolate chip cookies in care packages to soldiers stationed in the Pacific and in Europe. The soldiers ate them and shared them with men from other countries who had never tasted one. Letters went back to Massachusetts, back to New England newspapers, describing how the Toll House cookie was being eaten in the Philippines, in France, in the Pacific Islands. The cookie traveled with the war. Ruth Wakefield died on January 10, 1977. The Toll House Inn burned down in a kitchen fire in 1984 and was never rebuilt. There is nothing standing at that address in Whitman, Massachusetts today. But every bag of Nestlé chocolate chips currently being sold in grocery stores across the United States, across Canada, across multiple countries, has her recipe on the back. Most people who follow it have no idea whose recipe it is. $1 and a lifetime supply of chocolate. That was the deal. And it has been producing the most popular cookie in the world, continuously, since 1939. 10 foods, 10 origin stories, and almost none of them are as simple as they appear on a menu. The hamburger doesn't know who invented it. The hot dog is German. Barbecue was built by people who weren't given a choice. Fried chicken came from two traditions that met in a kitchen where neither tradition was free. Clam chowder started in a Native American cooking pot. Mac and cheese carries two names, one in the history books, one that should be. Deep dish pizza is something Italy doesn't recognize. Buffalo wings came from a wrong delivery, and a man the official story forgot. Nashville hot chicken started as punishment. The chocolate chip cookie was sold for $1. This is American food. Borrowed, contested, argued over, built by people who often didn't get credit, and eaten by 330 million people who mostly don't think about any of this while they're eating. That's fine. That's actually the most American thing about it.